We've been to all four corners of Britain in our quest to interview the great and good of entertainment. Comics, actors, writers, politicians, singers, dancers and choreographers. It doesn't matter who they are. They've all given me their own take on the world they live in and have, in their own way, helped to define what makes Britain great. So join me and my assistants as we get another insight into the marvellous and enigmatic world of showbiz here on Beyond the Title.
Making his Edinburgh Festival debut in 2003 with his one-man show Most Wanted, writer and comedian Paul Foot has become one of Britain's leading live performers thanks to his reserved, bizarre take on life. His award-winning Edinburgh show, By the Yard, in 2009 received critical acclaim and secured him a regular spot on Stuart Lee's comedy vehicle, which was broadcast on BBC Two from 2009 to 2016. I caught up with the man himself to chat about life, comedy and hairstyles. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Paul Foot. So, your 2010 Edinburgh show, Ash in the Attic, was directed by Noel Fielding. What was it like working with him?
Well, it was great. Basically, in early 2010, I saw Noel at a show somewhere, and he said, "Oh, you were brilliant." You know, I hadn't seen him for a while. I knew him from the early stages when we both started in the late 90s. And then he said, "Well, how are you getting on?" And I said, "Well, not very well, really." And he said, "Well, you're such a brilliant comedian. You deserve to be, better known." So he very generously put his name to the show. I mean, to say he directed it may be a slight. He did direct it a bit, but he sort of gave us a little bit of input. He put his name to the show, and I also got lots of publicity that I wouldn't have done otherwise. So he was a very, very generous man in that regard. So actually, working with him was fun, and it was just wonderful to see him after all those years, and I haven't really seen him for a while. And he's a very generous and warm person. And then, of course, after that, I was on the Buzzcocks quite a lot, partly due to Noel nagging them to get me off, and partly other people. And he was a very generous and wonderful man on that, as was Phil Jupiter. So yes, he's been a very good person in my career, as you know.
Fantastic. And why do you think Edinburgh remains a pivotal stepping stone for comedy success?
I don't think it does. I don't think it is a pivotal stepping stone for comedy success. I think a lot of comedians get far too stressed about it, take it far too seriously. Yes, of course, you could have some big success there, but it's not like it used to be years ago. If you won the Perrier Award, that would really mean it would be very big thing to launch you into a television career. It doesn't really work like that anymore. In fact, none of these places, Montreal is the same. I mean, they're all good places to do, but this idea that one single place is the most vital, some sort of holy grail, some place where everything's going to change, I think is totally overblown. So I think therefore most comedians get far too worried about it and take it far too seriously. And I always find Edinburgh, the month of August in Edinburgh, the most relaxing time of the year, because there's no travel. I just walk 5 or 10 minutes to do my show each day, and a nice audience every time. And then there's lots of nice people to see in the evenings and have a nice party and just enjoy myself. It's important in the sense that I take every gig seriously, and I want to make sure that audience is entertained thoroughly. But I never worry about all that rubbish about, critics and who was in the audience and all that. People make far too much of that, in my opinion.
Interesting. Now, following in the footsteps of titans of comedy such as Billy Connolly, Spike Milligan and the Two Ronnies, in 2011 you took your stage show, Ash in the Attic, to Melbourne. Now, What are the differences between Australian and British audiences?
Well, there aren't that many differences. The Australian audiences certainly share a very similar sensibility to the British, because of obvious reasons, more so than the Americans, who are a different sort of culture there. One thing I have noticed is the difference is, well, two things really. One is they're less reserved in Australia generally. So if it's in Britain, when the audience come in, they're all sort of nervous to go on the front row. Whereas in Australia, they all say, "Oh yeah, let's get on the front row," and they all pile in. I've noticed is that in Australia, there's sometimes, well, I suppose they take things more literally sometimes, and they're less cynical than us in some ways. And so there's a piece of comedy I do, and I do it in Britain, and it's about a man who runs a pineapple themed shop, and everything in the shop is based around pineapples, and it's a huge success. And then the man across the road runs a place called Guava Mania, all based around guavas, and it obviously isn't a success, and he ends up shooting himself in the head. So when I do it in Britain, everyone laughs and says, "Isn't that funny?" But when I do it in Australia, people often say, "Oh, isn't that sad?" And they come up to me after and say, "Oh, it's so sad that he run a business. It wasn't a success." You know, they're more sincere in a way.
Okay. Now, I first saw you on Stuart Lee's Comedy Vehicle. To what extent do you think programs of this kind are the modern-day equivalent of a traditional variety show?
Well, I suppose it is in a way. It was alternative. Of course, if you want the modern-day equivalent of the traditional variety show is really the Royal Variety Show or something, or you know, that is actually the equivalent. And I've never been on a Royal Variety Show, and probably won't. Or maybe I will one day, but I'm probably too sort of alternative for it. You know, it's much more mainstream. So I would say the traditional variety show is quite mainstream. The alternative comedy experience, I suppose, is like an alternative variety show, but sort of is and sort of isn't, because one of the things about it, of course, is that they wanted to have, I don't know how many programs are in a series, several programs and different comedians each program, and there aren't actually that many comedians doing really genuinely alternative stuff. So I think they had to have various comedians on who are not by any stretch of the imagination alternative. So I would say yes. I mean, you could have an alternative variety show. It would be very exciting. It's a very exciting idea. The idea of having a genuinely alternative variety show. But you probably would need more people to do it, or you'd need, you know, one person or several people doing a lot more in each one.
Now, in 2006, you starred in a variety show called Comedy for Connoisseurs. How did this help to raise your profile within comedy circles?
Yes, well, that was the real beginning, I suppose, of me finding my own audience properly. So, yes, I did a show where it was just in 2006 called Comedy for Connoisseurs, and it was just me the whole evening and just doing all sorts of silly comedy, and to a smaller audience, to a theatre show, and at the maximum of 40 people. So it allows for sort of improvised things and things that are slightly more, just different things that wouldn't necessarily work in a larger room. And that was the beginning, I suppose, of me finding my audience. I would advertise, and people would come to those shows, and then that then led to more people coming to my theatre shows. And those Comedy for Connoisseurs have been renamed now. It's called My Secret Shows, but they still live on all this time later, and in fact they're very popular. with people on my mailing list to come to the secret shows, because it allows me to flex the muscle, the different muscles, to when I'm on doing my theatre shows. When I'm doing my theatre shows, of course there is improvisation, but I'm often also recreating the same sort of story, the same sort of ideas each night, whereas the secret shows are highly improvised.
Now, 'Tis a Pity She's a Piglet. Where did you come up with a name like that as the title of your tour?
Well, obviously it's based on that play, 'Tis a Pity She's a Whore, which is a Regency play, I think, by, I've forgotten the name, John Donne or someone. So, so I based it on that. But I don't know really. When I come up with a new show title each year, it's always sometimes it takes ages to come up with a title, and sometimes like I remember once my agent saying to me, "What do you want to call the new show?" And I know there's a show on television called Cash in the Attic. I've never watched. I've no idea what's even on it. But no, I just said Ash in the Attic. I just said it as a joke, really, and and then to my surprise, found that was in fact the title of my show. That was my show, I think, in 2010. So yes, every 2 years now with the new show, it's time to come up with a new title.
Now, Russell Brand cites you as one of his biggest inspirations, but who are your comedy heroes?
Well, I suppose I'm one of those comedians who has never had a huge amount of influence, I think. When I went into comedy, I'd never really watched much stand-up comedy, and I just sort of did my own thing and made up my own rules. I suppose is why it's become sometimes different from what some other people are doing. I did like Monty Python and Fawlty Towers when I was growing up, and I liked Frankie Howard. And Tommy Cooper I liked the sort of clowning that he did. And the rest of the time, most of the people who influenced me are sort of composers. You know, I get inspired by people like Berlioz, you know, with their mad ways, and Bach with his work ethic. Or something. I just think I'll just sort of keep working like Bach did.
Now, to what extent has the phenomenon of stadium comedy impacted the significance of intimate entertainment?
Well, that's interesting. Stadium comedy, I've never played a stadium, so I don't know what it's like. But I do think that stadium comedy becomes different to theatre comedy, because suddenly not everyone can really see you, and they have to see you on screens and things. I remember speaking to Sarah Millican, and she would be famous enough if she wanted to play a big stadium in Manchester or somewhere like that. But she said to me she'd rather play a 3,000-seater theatre, maybe 5 or 6 times in the trot, than do a big stadium. And I think I would agree with that, because I think that playing a stadium is a whole different thing, and I think it loses some sort of intimacy. Whereas actually, you can these very well designed 3,000 or 4,000 seater theatres can feel really intimate. You can feel very close to your audience, and they can feel very close to you. Once you go to about 4,000, that isn't really possible anymore. And so it's not a problem I have to worry about now. It's not famous enough to have to play stadiums. But I think when I got to that stage, I would rather play the theatres. Because different things work in different... I mean, maybe there would be a way of making it work. It's a bit like when I was talking about my secret shows. There are things you can do in front of 40 people that you couldn't do even in front of 100. Even if all those 100 people were your best fans and they're absolutely on the same wavelength. It's just the scaling up of the audience changes the dynamic. And so maybe there would be a way of making things work to a satisfactory artistic extent in a stadium, but that's not something I have to worry about quite today.
I suppose it's all about that connection that you can get with a smaller audience. In a stadium, there's probably not a lot of connection whatsoever.
Probably not. I actually have some audience members who come to my secret shows, and they refuse to go to the theatre shows. They say, "I only like you in the secret show." But then you also get people who go to both. But yes, they're different. It's doing different things. So I think once you're in a stadium, it's more like being on television in a way. So it would be a different experience.
Now, looking back at your career, what is your proudest achievement?
I suppose my proudest achievement is simple, and it would be the same as for a lot of comedians, and that is to find an audience who come to see me in a theatre, and they're all on the same wavelength. In other words, I've found an audience who've got the same sense of humour as me. When I started, I was playing in comedy clubs, and some of the people liked it and some of the people didn't. And now all the people who don't like it, I don't see them. And the people who do like it come. So that's, I suppose, to me, that is, I've achieved, in a way, all I want to achieve by being able to make a living performing to people who are on the same wavelength and like my comedy. I mean, I would like to expand. I'm ambitious. It would be nice to reach bigger and bigger audiences. As far as I'm concerned, I've sort of won the lottery already, as it were, by having that audience.
Do you think there's a lot going on right now in the underground comedy scene?
Well, short answer is I don't know. I'm terribly out of touch. I mean, I don't go to many comedy clubs, so I very rarely play comedy clubs, so I don't really often see the sort of grassroots and what's happening there. I know there are other comedians doing shows in Melbourne and other things, and who are quite newer than me. I don't really know who they are or what they're up to. I sort of always just do my own thing. So I'm extraordinarily badly informed. In fact, probably an audience member who is into that sort of thing and goes to that sort of comedy and is interested in the alternative world would probably know 100 times more than I know. I just do my own thing, really.
Oh, brilliant.
Sorry, that's a disappointing answer.
No, this is good. And finally, what's next for Paul Foot?
What's next is I've more or less finished my current tour, Image Conscious. The last one is this Thursday. And then I shall be working all guns blazing on my new show, which I've already started on up to 2 years ago, really. Well, 1 year ago. So I shall be working on that intensively with my writing partner helping me as well, and get that ready for about April for previews, and then take it to the Edinburgh Festival, which is a very good place to work in a new show, doing it every night, and then take it on tour around the UK and Australia for 18 months after that.
Fantastic. I think that is all the questions we've got for you this evening.
Thank you to our guest for being the subject of another Beyond the Title interview. If you liked this, why not browse the website and see if there's anything else that takes your fancy. Don't forget to like our Facebook page to receive updates on forthcoming interviews and to see more information about me and what I do. Thanks again, and hopefully see you next time.